Hi, and welcome to Journey with Gigi. I am your host, Gigi Moorman, and our guest today is Congresswoman Val Demings, who was sworn into the 115th Congress in January 2017, representing Florida's 10th congressional district. In addition to her role as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, she also serves as the Assistant Whip Democrat. Representative Val Demings is the former Orlando police chief, serving over 27 years with the Orlando Police Department before being elected to Congress. Congresswoman Val Demings is a servant leader who has spent her life fighting for the rights of all citizens. A native of Jacksonville, Florida, she earned her Bachelor of Science degree in criminology from Florida State University. She is a living example that a woman can have it all: career, family, and community, and every day she goes for the gusto. I know you will enjoy learning more about her journey on today's show. Congresswoman Demings, how are you today?
I'm doing well. It's just great to be home and great to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited that you're on the show today. I'm glad that we were able to work it out with your schedule. I know how busy you are, and we'll make sure that the stories that we share today are going to have an impact on people's lives.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Okay, take us back to growing up in Jacksonville, Florida.
Well, I grew up in a two-bedroom wood frame house. I was the youngest of 7 children. My mother worked as a maid, and my father was a janitor. But the amazing thing about my mom, while we did not have much, we were poor, but my mom taught me to believe in myself, that I could be anything that I wanted to be and do anything that I wanted to do. And she said, never be defined by what's around you. Don't let other people define you. Don't be defined by your present circumstances. Always look to a future that's brighter than what's currently happening. And so she always pushed and encouraged me. We didn't have a lot growing up in Jacksonville in terms of material things, but we had a lot of love in my home. My dad used to go to work 7 days a week, and I didn't really understand the significance of that at the time. You know, in high school, I was in band and in chorus and ran track and played softball, and but they always made a way for me to do those things. My dad used to go to work 7 days a week, so I could do all of those things and make ends meet for our family. When I look back now at the sacrifices that they made for their children, it's a pretty phenomenal story.
It's amazing as adults and then as parents
Yeah.
to look back at your parents' story and your childhood and start to connect dots that you didn't connect before.
Yeah. I mean, my dad I can remember one time in particular when I wanted to go on a chorus trip. And we didn't have the money for me to go. I don't think we ever really had the money for me to go. But I remember my dad went over to the house of one of the men he worked for. And I remember sitting in the car, and all I was thinking was, just let him get the money, so I can go on this chorus trip. But I remember him knocking on that door and asking for an advancement on his pay so I could go on the trip. Now, what's really amazing about that is what it meant was when it was time for my dad to get paid, he would not get paid. Right. But he understood, a man who did not go past the 5th grade, understood that wanted me to have those opportunities so I could. Right. And for him to do that and so many other things. My mother, they both worked hard, but they taught us to believe in ourselves. And when I look back at their sacrifices now, I know for a fact that where I am today is a direct result of the work that they did, the prayers that they sent up to heaven, and the work that they did for me to live the dream.
Because he was putting his pride aside.
That's the thing.
There's no pride when you're trying to provide for your child.
I mean, we say there's nothing like a parent's love. And look, youngest of 7, we grew up in a household, like I said, 2-bedroom, wood frame house. There was a lot of love. But now as an adult, when I think back, for him to put his pride aside as a man growing up, a black man growing up in America, and to knock on that door and say, can you give me an advance on my pay, or whatever else he had to do, how blessed were we to have him and my mom.
Right, amazing.
It was amazing.
And as the youngest of 7, how was your relationship with your siblings? Would you play together? Like my sisters were 4 and 5 years older, so as it got to a certain point, they kind of left me aside.
Yeah, we kind of had 2 generations almost in our family. I remember my oldest brother was 17 when I was born, and he was getting married and ready to go off to the Air Force. And so we had like an older group in our family and then a younger group that were closer to my age. But you know what? We did not realize at the time. It was a small, crowded house. And my mother really was kind of the one who kept the law and order in the house, right? I mean, everything, there was an order to when we ate, what we ate, even, you know, you just can't go in and out of the refrigerator, in and out of the house, play in the living room. I mean, she was a law and order person in the house. But I have nothing but good memories. It was fun. We had an automatic baseball team and basketball team. We'd play kickball, you know, all automatically built in right there in the family. And so I was blessed to, I never felt that I went without, although I'm sure that there were things that I did, but I never really felt, being the youngest of 7 children, that I did not get something that I needed to have. Growing up.
Right, the needs versus the wants. Your parents provided the needs.
They provided the needs. There was always food on the table. My mom always made a pot of something, and it was the best pot, you know, in the world. We always had plenty of food. We had Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid was the thing then, right? It was always
different flavors.
Different flavors. We had dessert. I mean, I can never think about what I didn't have. I have the best memories growing up in Jacksonville.
Which I love. Every child should have that.
Should have good memories. And the sad part of it is, see, those good memories aren't determined by how much money you have or where you live. And so many times we are made to believe that it's all about the materialistic things, right? We were poor. But the love we had, the fun we had, the good memories we had, because we were a family. We were a family that prayed together. We were a family that really stayed together. And I have good memories of my childhood.
I love it. Now, their perseverance, their strength, was that what convinced you to get a job at 14?
You know what? I always felt that I needed to help. And that was another thing my parents taught my siblings and me, was to be very responsible. We all kind of got out as soon as we could and found a job so that we could help out. And I was under no obligation to do it, but I felt like, look, this is what you do, right? At 14,
do your part.
You go out and do your part. My first job was at a retirement home as a dishwasher.
Okay.
And I was proud to be at that retirement home. Now think about it, I was 14, but there were people who were working there who were married with families. Right. And so the little money that I was making, you know, I could help, you know, support in whatever small way, pay for gas, whatever, pay for my own band or chorus stuff. But they were taking care of their families. And then from there, I went to work I worked at Dairy Queen, I worked at McDonald's, and I just always felt like that was what I was supposed to do. I wanted to be self-sufficient, and I wanted to help out.
So that's probably another reason, or one of the reasons why you decided to go to college.
I did, and I remember when I graduated, and look, I made pretty good grades and had a great senior year. But I was working at McDonald's at the time, and I told my mom was like, so where do you want to go to college? And I said, well, Mom, why don't I work for another year, save up some money, and then I'll go. Okay. What I realized, though, was that I knew we didn't have the money for me to go to college. I didn't want to put any additional strain on my family. And I didn't see a way for me to be able to do it at that time. But my mother said to me, she said, nope. She said, you're going. She said, these are her words, not mine, that you're too smart to stay home. And she was worried that if I stayed, that I would get comfortable
Right, and not go.
and not go. And so she said, you apply to the college of your choice and you're going. I remember thinking, oh my goodness, how are we going to make this work?
Right.
But I applied to the college of my choice, which was Florida State University. And I remember, okay, now, I was kind of like, okay, now what? Okay, I applied, Mom told me to apply, but now what? And I remember getting the acceptance letter. And I was so excited about that, right? I applied to one school. It was a school that I wanted. And that was kind of my mom's philosophy, like, if that's what you want, you go after that.
Gotcha.
And I remember being accepted, and I'm like, okay, now what? And I remember when it was time for me to go, my mother packed up my stuff in the trunk of our station wagon, and she and my dad took me to Tallahassee. And my mom dropped me off, and they basically said, we're praying for you, you're going to be fine, we'll see you later.
Wow.
And I remember looking around like, okay.
That's it?
Okay. But my mother was a woman of faith. She had kind of crazy faith, right? And so there I was. I knew I was going to have a roommate. I didn't know who she was going to be. I was in a strange place. I didn't know where to go eat that night. It was just quite the experience. But I made it.
Right.
I made it. I didn't know how I was going to pay my tuition. When my mother and father dropped me off in Tallahassee, I had $50, which was a lot for this girl to have in her possession. I applied for loans, I applied for grants, whatever I could do, whatever I could get, and I worked at McDonald's in Tallahassee. And 4 years later, graduated with my degree in criminology.
So while you were at Florida State University, you became a Delta Sigma Theta?
No, I actually
No?
did not pledge until I pledged graduate chapter.
Okay.
After I moved back home. When I was in Tallahassee, I worked, my spare time was pretty much taken up studying and working at McDonald's. So I could pay my tuition, buy my books, and be able to stay there for 4 years. And so I did not pledge my beloved sorority until I got back and I pledged graduate chapter.
Okay, I think that's a good thing to point out before we take a break, that just because you didn't pledge during undergraduate doesn't mean that you cannot still participate in
It does not mean, because
sorority or
what
fraternity.
I knew at Florida State, if Delta would have me, was that if I pledged, I wanted to be a Delta. And because I was so moved by their level of public service and academic excellence.
I've been fortunate to work with the Delta Theta Sigma sorority here in Orlando, and the amount of community service work that they do is amazing.
It's, look, if you're interested, or anyone's interested in pledging, you better be working in your community. And you need to be able to show a pattern of public service. And also the focus on academic excellence. Delta Sigma Theta, our 22 founders, back in 1913, understood that as black women, if we were going to have any chance of being successful in that America and America of today, it would be through academic excellence. Not just going to college and getting a degree, but excelling. And so I'm glad that when I was ready, Delta was ready for me.
Well, shout out to all the Deltas out there. I'm going to take us to a short break, and then we're going to come back and talk about your early career and how you ended up using your criminology degree once you got into police force.
Okay.
Sounds good. Don't go anywhere. We have a lot more to talk about when we come back. Welcome back. We were just chatting with Congresswoman Val Demings about life in Florida, growing up in Jacksonville, Florida, attending college in Tallahassee, Florida, Florida State University. Go Seminoles.
Go Seminoles. Go Noles. And let me just say this, since you brought it up. Florida State University is the University of Florida.
Well, there
I'll
you
leave
go.
That.
There
I'll
you
leave
have
that
it.
right there.
Okay, all you Gators, just remember, I didn't say that. The Congresswoman, I'm bowing down to her.
They know it. They know it.
Stuart Moore will call me later. I love it. It's a healthy rivalry between
It's a
the
healthy-
University of Florida and the Florida State.
It's a healthy rivalry.
Yes.
And when Florida State plays Florida
Oh, wow.
in November,
Yeah.
there are few things that can compare to that game. I remember one time I was going to speak at a church in Gainesville the day after the big game, right? I couldn't finish my speech until I realized how the game was going to end, right? I'm just like staying up all night. And it was one of those Hail Mary wins, and
Oh,
Florida
wow.
State
Those
did.
are
I'm
the
like,
worst.
oh, okay. Let me get my, okay, it's all good. But it's a healthy rivalry.
So you
but
guys
it is
did
a
win
serious,
that one.
It's a serious
Oh,
rivalry.
it's serious.
Yeah.
I've seen a little fisticuffs, although we don't promote those.
No,
but
we don't.
The verbal,
no.
the verbal rivalry is
Yeah, but
good.
it's serious, and things get really serious, right? I mean, you know, at the police department, I had a lot of friends who were Seminoles, I had a lot of friends who were Gators, but during the game time, it's like there are no. If you're a Gator,
Right.
don't even talk to us,
Right.
It's all about warfare, right?
It's like the New York Yankees and Mets.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
We just try to keep it healthy. So talk to us about staying in Florida. You graduate from Florida State University. You decided to become
Florida
a social
State.
worker.
Yeah, I moved back to Jacksonville. And look, let me say this about Florida. You know, every home has its challenges, right? But I love the state of Florida. And I was born and raised here, and I chose to stay here because I think the potential in Florida is just so great and so wonderful. And I moved back when I graduated home, and I needed to find a job. And so I applied for a social worker's job at the Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services, which is now Children and Families, the Department of Children and Families. And I went to work first as a social worker working with families that needed emergency services, whether that was their lights were off or whether they needed emergency health care or whether they needed food. Whatever the emergency was, we dealt with those families. And also worked for a little bit with the SNAP program. So when we talk about that in Congress, I understand the significance and importance of that. But then worked as a foster care social worker. And you know, a lot of people will talk to me about working as a police officer, and believe me, being a law enforcement officer is a tough job. But being a social worker working with foster care kids, I think every child, regardless of how much money they have, deserves to be wanted and loved by their parents.
Absolutely.
And that was just really it was a good experience, but it was a heartbreaking experience. I remember one day I was there, and I had a case with a little boy who was having some difficulty, and he was doing some things that really I saw as a danger to him or others, mostly to himself. He was 10 years old, and I went to my supervisor and said that we need to have him evaluated so he can get help if he needs that. And I was told kind of about the process. And I knew it was going to take days for him to be cleared. So I went to the courts, and I sat in the courtroom all day long waiting to see the judge that evening. And the judge granted me an order to have him, the little boy, evaluated, which was a good thing. And I remember my supervisor at the time basically reprimanded me for going against their rules. And I was just so crushed by that, because as an organization, regardless of what the organization is, we're supposed to be there to help people. And this kid needed help, and I did what I knew was the right thing to do. But I was just so disenchanted by the experience. And I was sitting at my desk one day thinking about, okay, what's next? And there was an advertisement that came over my radio at that time that said the Orlando Police Department was in Jacksonville. They were over at Edward Waters College, and they were recruiting. And I said, well, you know what? I graduated from Florida State with my degree in criminology. I ultimately wanted to use the degree to go to law school. And I said, but you know what? I really enjoyed those law enforcement classes that I took. I'm going to go over and hear what they have to say. And I did. I went over during my lunch break. They had me fill out some paperwork. I took a couple of exams. I went home. They wanted me to come back that evening to do a 1.5 mile run. When I got home, I guess my better judgment started sitting in, and I said, you know what, I would have to leave home, and I said, I'm not going back. And one of the recruiters, who wasn't there when I went during my lunch break, but what came later, was going through the paperwork. And the other people who were with him said, you know, there was a really sharp black female who came during lunch. She was supposed to come for the run, but didn't show back up. And he was like, well, what's her name? Right. And they said, Valdez Bonita Butler. And he said, there can only be one black female with that name. He and I had gone to Florida State together.
Oh, wow.
And he pulled up my application and called me and talked me into finishing the process. Okay. What a blessing that ended up being. The next morning I went and took the run, came down to Orlando several times to complete the process, and I never forget when I received the letter that says, congratulations, you have been accepted to attend the J.C. Stone Police Academy. So that's kind of how I went from social work
right.
to police work. It was just right place, right time, and then somebody to kind of bring it home from my past.
So when you got the letter, you didn't feel like, you felt excited. You didn't feel like, what did I get myself
into? I did.
Into?
I said, when I read the letter, I said, oh my God, you know, because I'm still going through, I'm back home. Right. This is familiar to me. Police work.
And it's a dangerous field.
It's a dangerous field.
Right.
And I'll never forget the look on my parents' faces when I told them, not only was I going to be a police officer, but that I was moving to Orlando. But you know what was so amazing about it? Now I know they wanted to say, what in the, what?
Right.
But they knew I was going to do it. And they didn't want to send me to do that job with the burden of not having their blessings, if you will. And my mother said, oh, that's okay. You know, they were like, okay, you know, we're going to be praying for you. We wish you the best. But they were devastated, really. They were worried about me.
Of course.
But I packed up and moved to Orlando. And it has been one of the best experiences ever. Went to the police academy, was elected class president when, you know, my goal, my plan was to, okay, I'm in the police academy, I'm going to kind of fly under the radar, not draw any attention to myself. Right. I just want to get through. And I was elected as class president by my peers, which was pretty exciting, but I couldn't stay under the radar in that position.
Definitely not.
But at the end, I received the Board of Trustees Award for overall excellence. The academy was a great experience, and I was too excited about coming back to OPD and hitting the ground running on midnight shift as a police officer.
So is there one experience during the midnight shift, because you're out on patrol now, you're a young police officer, is there like one experience that always stands out in your mind?
There are a lot of them.
Reinforced?
Because it's, you know, I can remember, and you know when you're a rookie, it's hard to contain your excitement and energy, and you really do believe, I know that I did, that I could save the world. When I think about being a social worker, now I'm a cop, it's all about saving the world, but it's just in different ways. And so running, you know, through alleyways and in backyards and being in foot pursuits, and regardless of who the person was we were pursuing, there was fear, but it did not keep me from doing that job. I always knew that God was with me. He had given me this, and that he was going to make sure that I was able to see it through. And I also just realized if I died on the streets of Orlando, I would have died doing something good. And, you know, what did Dr. King say? If you don't have something that's worth dying for, life is really not worth living. And so I loved, you know, Friday, Saturday night, I mean, it was like, that was, it was dangerous, right, but it was so exciting because at the end of the shift, I knew that I had done good, right, and that was a really good feeling.
Right, you can go home and sleep soundly knowing that you did your job to keep the community safe and to take some bad people off the street, which we thank all of our officers for.
Take some bad people off of the street.
Amen.
you know?
Okay. I'm going to take us to another break, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about your experience during the law enforcement industry and some of the strategies that you use to take some of those bad people off the street.
Okay.
Sounds good. Stay tuned for more Real Talk after the break. Okay. For those of you just joining the conversation, we were talking to Congresswoman Val Demings, and we were just talking about your career in law enforcement with the Orlando Police Department, starting off on the beat patrol, which is something that's so important for new officers to be involved with because that's how you connect to the community.
It's how you connect to the community, and I remember, you know, whenever we got a hot call, which means, you know, it was an emergency and we had to get there fast, I always had this knight in shining armor feeling that when we were going to get there, things were going to be better for the person who was going through whatever the dangerous situation was. And so when I became a sergeant and served in any managerial role and as the chief of police, I always reminded the men and women that the people who pick up the phone and dial 911 are not having a good day. Right. Because when you have to do that, things have gone drastically wrong. When you get there, they expect for you to make it better. Right. Work hard to make things better for that person who made the call.
When you were chief of police during your 27-year career in law enforcement, what was the maximum number of employees that you had under you?
1,065.
1,065. How do you keep that that goal at the heart of everybody's mind when you're dealing with so many different personalities, when you're dealing with a violent crime streak that comes through our neighborhood that you were able to help turn around?
Let me say this. I remember, let me go back to when I was getting ready to go to the police academy. And the training sergeant at that time said to me, "So what did you do before you came here?" And I said, "Well, I was a social worker." And she said, "Well, police work is nothing like social work." And I didn't say anything. I just listened. And you know what I found out? Is that, yeah, police work is a dangerous job and we arrest people and put them in jail. We sometimes have to fight. We sometimes have to do a lot of other things. But it is about solving problems and it is about taking care of people, which is a lot like social work. What I realized as a police chief was that my most important resource at the department were the men and women who did the job. That if we were going to be successful, there was no way we could do that without the men and women who worked at the Orlando Police Department. When I took over as chief, crime was at an all-time high in Orlando, and I had to kind of laugh to myself and say, okay, Orlando gets its first woman chief, crime's at an all-time high. I knew that if I was not able to reduce the crime rate, people would not think, well, it's the highest it's ever been. That's quite the challenge. I think there are a lot of people who would have said, well, she's a woman. What do you expect? But instead of focusing on the crisis, I chose to focus on the opportunity because that's what crises do for us. They provide the best opportunity. And so instead of being mediocre or just trying to maintain the status quo, I stepped up to bat and swung for the fences. I totally reorganized the police department. I disbanded some dysfunctional units. And I made everybody understand. Number one, I made sure every member of the police department understood our mission and our motto, because how can you do what you're supposed to do if you don't know what that is? And then I made sure they understand what our goals were, and that was the reduction of violent crime. And everybody had to be on that sheet of music. But I also understood that we could not be successful without community involvement and support. I spent a lot of time meeting and talking to, asking questions in the community and involving the community in our process. And we were able to reduce violent crime by 40%. We were able to reduce our homicide rate by 54%. Could not do it without men and women focused on the mission and the community being a part of the solution.
Right. You've broken so many ceilings in your career, the first black female police chief in Orlando. And you talked about, the fact that somebody would say maybe if the crime didn't go down, it's because you were a woman. And I've heard you talk about the fact that there wasn't a physical requirement when you became a police officer, and that some of the male officers were a little concerned about your height, 5'4".
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you've never let your height, you've never let your sex, you've never let your race stand in the way
You
of
know,
you getting to the next goal.
what I do know is that God made me just the way I am. And I do believe that He does not give us opportunities that He has not prepared us to handle. And I remember shortly after my appointment as chief, there were people who would say, men and women, pretty much, they would say, congratulations. And then they would go to, well, you know, that's a big job. And initially I was like, oh, thank you, yeah, it is. But then it finally dawned on me. And the next person who said that to me, I said, thank you. It is a big job. But the job didn't get any bigger because there's a woman in the chief's office now. And I think we as women, you know, it's difficult to get other people to believe in us if we struggle with believing in ourselves. I think that we too often allow fear to hold us back. Fear is the destroyer of success.
Agreed.
Fear holds you back from being the greatest, right? And also I think we worry a little bit too much about what people have to say, who most times don't even matter to us. People who are not directly in our lives. And so, you know, we worry about failure. My gosh, I would go back to school. I would go for the promotion. I would start a business. I would be greater than I am today. But my God, I might fail. If you fail, number one, it's not the first time. People fail every day. But if you look at great people around this country who are the most successful, many of them fail the first time. But you know what they had? What may separate them from other people? They tried it again. They got up, they dusted themselves off, and they got back in the game. And so we have to understand our own power and our strength and believe in ourselves. And like my mother said to me when I was a little girl, don't let other people define you. They might tell you you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're the wrong gender, you're the wrong color. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is what you believe. And you can be the greatest. I'll take my mother's words any day.
And more young girls have to hear it.
They do. I mean, what we tell, you know, we still should be encouraging girls to be in non-traditional careers and roles. We have to tell them to be interested in STEM programs. The ratio is still very off balance with girls who go into math and science versus our boys. Look, I raised 3 sons, right? And so what we have to do for our children, though, is to provide a pathway for them to be successful and encourage them to do things that may not have ever been done before. What's inside of you? Tap into the genius that is inside of you.
And that faith has allowed you to have it all.
Faith does.
You've had your career, you've had a successful marriage, you've taken care of your children, your 3 boys, your 5 grandchildren. You balance it all, and that's something that women struggle to do.
When I talk to women, and they do, they say, I can't do it all. I can't go back to school because I have my family, or I can't. I remember I wanted to go on a mission trip. I was a lieutenant at the police department, and I wanted to go on a mission trip, and then I started, gosh, how can I go? You know, I have my sons and blah, blah, blah. And one of our chaplains said to me, well, you know what? Don't you think your husband would step up and help you so you could realize that purpose that you want to fulfill? When I wanted to go to the FBI National Academy, it's a 3-month course in Quantico, Virginia. I was that self-talk that we many times do. I can't go because, don't you think you could go and it would be okay because those around you? We have to learn to ask for help. Right. You know, we don't do that as women. We always feel like we have to do it all.
On our own, right.
We can have it all. I really believe that. We don't have to do it all. And what I do know is that I have a lot of friends, family who love and support me. And they are there for me. They want to help me. And we have to just realize that there are a lot of people around you who want you to realize your dream, and they'll help you get there.
I'm going to remember that and start repeating it. We can have it all, but we don't have to do it all.
That's right.
And on that note, I'll take us to another break. We will see you soon for more with today's guest. Welcome back. We are chatting with Congresswoman Val Demings, U.S. Representative for Florida District 10 and the Assistant Whip Democrat. We were talking about having it all but not having to do it all.
That's right.
And I want to shift us into pivoting, because that's another thing that I think women allow fear to stop them from doing.
That's right.
And so you have a successful career in law enforcement. You've reached the top of your career. You're the police chief, doing great, setting off records, reducing crime, doing good in our community. And then you decide that you want to go into politics.
Wow.
Wow.
When I announced my retirement from OPD, I was contacted by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee to consider running for Congress. I'm not sure I would have ever gotten there by myself. And I met with some representatives, talked to a lot of different people. I thought my husband and my sons would talk me out of it, even considering it. My husband said, I think you'd be a great member of Congress. I said, you're no help. Let me go to my sons
Right.
who love me. And they said, we think you'd be great. I said, y'all are just trying to get rid of me. You want me in D.C. But I went up to D.C. I met with a lot of different people. But what was interesting was this. I talked to the Democratic whip, and he said, women generally have to be asked 7 times
Wow.
before we will do something out of our comfort zone.
Okay, I could see that.
Men just kind of look in the mirror and say, my God, I'd make a great member of Congress, or I'd make a great senator. And we're going through all that self-talk, trying to talk ourselves out of it.
Right.
I met with the Democratic leader, and she said, at that time, 1 in 6 children go to bed hungry every night in a country that we say is the greatest country in the world. Those 2 conversations helped me, along with my husband and my son's support and some wonderful friends. It helped me to make the decision to run. Now, I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid, and this was in 2011 when I ran in 2012. I wasn't afraid of winning, and I wasn't afraid of losing, because I believe that God wants us to just focus on the destination, the journey. He wants us to focus on the journey. He will control the destination. He wants us to be faithful. The journey. I didn't win in 2012, but I came back in 2016, and I had an overwhelming victory. And I just believe, number one, God does not give us something that he does not see through to fruition on his own time.
Right.
And we have to have the faith to step out when he says step. Not we sitting back going, oh, but the time's not right. Oh, I got this, I got that. But faith is about stepping into a place. Dr. King said it's about taking the first step when you cannot see the entire staircase.
Yes, having faith in sight unseen.
That's it.
But knowing that you're destined to do
You're
something.
going to be okay.
You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Exactly. So why do you think more women are not in politics?
I sure wish only 19% of the people in Congress are women. And I sure think that we make a difference. We just govern differently. We have a remarkable ability to see the whole field, like a quarterback, right? Because we multitask all the time. And we don't mind making decisions as a group. We don't mind sharing the credit. And so I just think that more women need to be encouraged to tap into the genius inside of them. And I'm a part of a group in Congress called Women's Lead, where I travel all over the country, and I help female candidates run for Congress.
Nice. We definitely need more Congresswoman Val Demings in the White House or in the government helping us to shape what this world is going to look like because there's so much turmoil. So I'm always honored when I'm reading articles or watching you on TV to know that you are fighting. You're fighting against the immigration laws that are not compassionate or fair, that you're fighting for gun control, and that you are a vocal opponent when things are being done wrong.
As a police chief, as a law enforcement officer, I saw the effects of good government and I saw the effects of bad government. And to have the ability to go to Washington and legislate, I think is just such a great place to be. I'm free. I clearly know what's right and I clearly know what's wrong. I'm not trying to be the most popular. I'm not trying to be the most talked about. I want to be the most effective. Mm-hmm. For people to be gunned down, for example, in a church or synagogue, a movie theater, at a concert, in a school, which should be one of the safest places for our children, safer than their home, in a country that we say is the greatest country in the world, is ridiculous. For children to be separated from their parents is ridiculous. And I will continue to fight for what I know is right and fight against that which I know is wrong.
I love it. What do you say to the people that say we need more police officers in schools and that's the solution?
Well, I think it's, I wish that that was the only solution, right? I think the prevalence of guns in our society is a problem. And so I think we need to start with sensible gun control legislation. Mm-hmm. Guns are the weapon of choice because they kill. We need to make sure that we can keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. Okay. Schools, we need to look at crime prevention through environmental designs, make sure that we harden our schools, make sure we do things like where we have one entrance into the school and one way out of the school. Mm-hmm. Police officers were originally put on our campuses to help to improve the relationship between kids and the police. They have been pressed into service, into serving more of a security role. I think that everybody always feels comfortable when they see an officer, which is a good thing. But it's not that simple to just put officers on our school campuses. Everybody needs to be involved.
Agree. I appreciate the fact that you are out there fighting the good fight for us. I love the fact that you are so family and community oriented.
I am.
Congratulations to you on all of your success.
Thank you.
I thank you for coming on the show today.
It's been great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Journey with Gigi. I do hope that you enjoyed learning more about our guest, Congresswoman Val Demings. You can learn more about her and her initiatives on her website, www.demings.house.gov. I hope that today's conversation is one that you were able to relate to connect with, and to be empowered by. I'm your host, Gigi Moorman. I look forward to our next journey.